Greetings, travelers. I'm your host, the C-Dot that knows a lot, Dr. Waluigi. We will soon be arriving at my personal favorite horror movies, but first, let's talk about the movies that, while are popular, just didn't make it into the top 10 for one reason or another. And if these movies are on your top 10 list, good for you. This is my list, and if you don't agree with me, then go make your own list. Anyway, this is part 4 of my 50 favorite horror movies. Number 20. Psycho. Yes, I'm well aware that this is one of the most important horror movies ever made, and that putting it this low on the list is sacrilege. However, if I'm being perfectly honest, the movie isn't perfect. I do think that the movie still holds up in terms of acting and storytelling, and is an interesting murder mystery, but this is one of many horror movies that was hyped up for me, and in my opinion, the hype wasn't quite there for me. I do still agree that it is one of the greatest horror movies of all time, and is worth watching again and again, but I was going into this expecting a little bit more slasher over-the-top kills, and I ended up with a slow murder mystery instead. On top of that, I really hate the overuse of the Psycho theme. It's literally in almost every scene, and it gets annoying very quickly. But like I said, it is still one of the greatest horror movies of all time, just not one of my top 10 favorites. Number 19. Ghost Train. This is a movie that I came across when I was watching a lot of Japanese horror films, and it is by far one of the weirdest J-horror films I think I've ever seen. And I love it. It follows the story of a haunted train ticket. Yeah, the movie doesn't actually have a ghost train in it. It's just a ticket that comes out of this specific red bag and then you die in a haunted tunnel. Which then follows a young girl who is trying to figure out why one of her friends was killed by the ghost ticket. While this plot isn't the weirdest thing that J-horror has ever created, what is weird, at least to me, is the twist ending. I won't go into any spoilers, but I will say that this is one of the most unexpected and out there twists to a movie that I've ever seen, especially for a movie that came out in 2006 and from Japan, no less. Number 18. Krampus. I'm so happy to see that more people are checking out this movie during the Christmas season. A movie about a realistic dysfunctional family during Christmas and how they have to survive from an ancient Christmas demon, and yes, it is based on an actual myth that originated in the Swiss Alps. This movie is one of the few Christmas horror films that I think trumps the others for 3 reasons. One is that the family is genuine and likable. Many movies that portray a dysfunctional family usually make them too unlikable or too over the top, but this film is able to find that balance and shows the characters as an actual family who band together and try to survive their predicament, even if there are some weird and silly moments. Second is the special effects. While there are a few moments with CG, the rest of the movie's effects are practical, and that's what all movie genres should be doing by using that balance of making them have CG but also have practical effects when they need them. On top of that, there are a ton of references to other horror movies as well as Christmas movies. I won't mention any of them here, but I do recommend playing the movie reference drinking game for those of you who haven't seen this movie yet. Which leads to the biggest reason people talked about this movie so much, the ending. Many people, including myself, were surprised at the twist ending of this movie to the point that it has some people split on how the movie is supposed to end. Some people think that it's a dark fate ending with the family stuck in eternal Christmas and reliving the same event over and over again. But then you get the people like me who got a different take on it if you know the myth. Again, I dare not spoil how this ending goes, but I will say if you've only seen it once, watch it again. You might be surprised by what you find. Number 17. Halloween. one of the horror classics about a mental patient who escapes and returns to his hometown to go on a killing spree. This movie still holds up even 4 decades later. A simple story, but what makes this film so great is the atmosphere, and the killer Michael Myers. There's interesting Easter eggs that, while the characters call him by his name, the credits list him as the Shape, as if to say that he might not be Michael Myers and is some otherworldly monster that kills for no reason other than he just kills. It's what makes the movie work and makes it all the creepier, especially at the end of the movie. Which again, I won't spoil for those who haven't seen it. The only reason I don't like it as much is because it's called Halloween, but has very little Halloween themes other than just a few kids wearing costumes. This was improved on in other movies, but the less said about those movies the better. Number 16. Pumpkinhead. One of the few underrated horror films that really needs to make a comeback, the movie follows a man who loses his son after a group of teenagers accidentally kill him, so he goes to a witch to bring forth a demon to exact his vengeance upon those who killed his son. The movie has really great atmosphere by having different lighting in different scenes by changing the colors in the shots from blue showing safety to orange showing happiness to red showing danger and so on. On top of that, this movie has some of the best lore that I wish they expanded upon in the sequels, but sadly those movies did nothing to further the interesting ideas that this movie presented. If I can recommend any horror movie from the 90s that has a similar feeling to the creepy atmosphere of the Friday the 13th franchise, this is definitely the movie that will make you think twice about going into the woods alone. Number 15. The People Under the Stairs. I've said before that I'm not the biggest fan of Wes Craven. I think he's a very talented man who's created some of the best and well-known horror films in the 80s and 90s, but that doesn't mean I like everything he's made. But one of the movies that always puts a smile on my face whenever I put it in is The People Under the Stairs. The movie about a young kid who fights to save his family from the crazy landlords who want to tear down his home when he discovers the horrible things they've been doing to other kids in order to create the perfect family. This movie is a clear commentary on the social standings of the inflation and racism that was going on in the 90s, and it cranks that up to 11 with the family being the perfect clean white bread American family that commercials sold you in the 50s. I do think that this is Wes Craven's best movie for how entertaining the villains are and how likable and relatable our hero is. He just wants to help his family and he's willing to do anything to make sure that they don't get thrown out onto the streets. Plus, this has 2 of the funniest scenes involving the main kid fighting off the dad and his dog. I know that Jordan Peele is planning on directing or producing a remake of the movie, and I'm personally on the fence, due to his less than successful remake of The Twilight Zone and helping out with the subpar remake of Candyman. But until then, I will be rewatching this classic and laughing all the way. Number 14. The Fog. This is one of many underrated classics done by John Carpenter, and I wish more people knew about it because it truly deserves as much attention as Halloween or The Thing. A small town is celebrating its 100-year anniversary when a strange fog starts to roll in and something inside the fog starts attacking the different residents of the town. I know I sound like a broken record, but this movie's strongest aspect is the atmosphere. When the fog starts to roll in, you can tell right away that something is off about it. The glow and not being able to see the monsters hiding inside it. Which I know look like the Jawas from Star Wars, but this was made in 1980, so I'm willing to forgive it for the writing. Which is what makes this film so good. Like every other John Carpenter film, he's able to make a simple premise and pull you in with the writing and great music. If you're in the mood for a John Carpenter style ghost story, this one is great to play on those cold, foggy nights. Number 13. Juan The Grudge. One of the most popular Japanese horrors ever made, Ju-on is a sort of anthology series that follows families that move into a haunted house where everyone dies from the curse placed by the first family who lived there. Their story is very sad, from being these people who lost their lives to Kayako's jealous and crazy husband, which continues the theme of restless anger due to a tragic event and how that anger is passed on from person to person. Takashi Shimizu captures those themes and presents them in an interesting and disturbing light that makes me come back to this series. If there's at least one series that you should watch from Japan, it's this one, as it's more interesting and easier to follow than Ringu. However, I can't recommend the American remakes, as those movies don't capture the atmosphere or the creepy imagery that the originals were able to. Number 12. A Nightmare on Elm Street. While I'm not the biggest fan of Freddy Krueger, this film is still a favorite of mine that holds up to this day. Wes Craven's movie about a maniac that kills kids in their dreams is both very subtle and stylized, especially for the time it came out. The effects and characters hold up the movie for me, as they weren't just dumb teenagers that went out to get killed in the woods, though I do love those movies just as much. If you want to see more on what I think of the series as a whole, check out my reviews here on YouTube. I do go into more detail about the whole franchise and its effect on the horror genre. Number 11. One Missed Call. One of the most underrated Japanese horror films of all time, One Missed Call is a horror movie that is both a visual delight and an interesting look at the technology that was coming out at the time. The movie follows several characters who receive strange calls that come from 2 weeks into the future, which turned out to be themselves on the day that they die. One of the things that Japanese horror likes to discuss about the most in their movies is the dangers of modern-day technology, with this movie focusing on cell phones and the dangers and mysteries of that particular type of technology. The movie was directed by Takeshi Miike, a man who's done several different movies that are popular in Japan, including Ichi the Killer, Audition, and my favorite parody of the Sentai genre, Zebra Man. I will be covering this movie at a later time, and maybe the remake, as I think way too many people hate that movie for the wrong reasons.